Hello, friends. Welcome back to the podcast. This is episode 2 of Miscellaneous Chats, and I'm your host, Misty Rizzo. In today's episode, I wanted to go into a little bit more detail about my pregnancy loss, coming off of birth control, getting pregnant, the pregnancy that I did have, telling our families, things leading up to the miscarriage, and then a little bit those first couple of weeks after the miscarriage. So today's episode will be a little bit deeper. There will be a little bit of discussion about blood and obviously the miscarriage itself. So, listen at your own caution. I don't think I'm saying that right, but it's totally fine. So to backtrack, I was on Nexplanon for about 2.5 years. For those of you that don't know, Nexplanon is an implant birth control. So it's this little tiny rod that gets implanted into your upper arm. It is good to be used for 3 years, I believe. So I got mine in January of 2021, and it wasn't supposed to come out until January of 2024. But I, sometime mid last year in 23, was just sick of being on birth control. I was having a lot of side effects. My cycles were wonky, and I was just done. I was ready to get off of it. So my, at the time, fiance and I discussed, what timing would be best. So after chatting a little bit, we decided that I would get it out in September. I got it out, I think right around the middle of September. And then I had my first cycle at the end of September. And I don't think I had one in October. I probably should have written this part down, huh? I don't think I had one in October. I think my next full cycle was November 1st. And then my husband and I got married November 19th. And we left for our honeymoon December 4th. So leading up to the honeymoon, the day or two before we were leaving for the honeymoon, I had a suspicion that I was pregnant because my period app said that I was late. And so I was like, maybe my body's still just adjusting coming off of birth control, whatever. So I did take a test before we went because obviously we were going on a cruise. We got the drink package. I was trying to have a good time. So I took a test before we left for the honeymoon, and it was negative. And so I was like, okay. I didn't really think about it much. We weren't trying to get pregnant. Like I said before, we weren't doing anything to prevent it, but we weren't necessarily trying to get pregnant. So the test being negative was just like, okay, my body's still just adjusting after coming off of birth control. So we go on our honeymoon. A few days into the cruise, I was just still suspicious. I couldn't get it off my mind, and I was like, I don't know, this is weird. I still haven't started my cycle, and, I don't know. This is just strange. So I told Kevin about it, my husband. I didn't want to not tell him, but I wanted it to kind of be a surprise. We all have this cutesy picture in our head about when we find out we're pregnant, and then we tell our husbands and yada yada, or our partners, whatever. And so I didn't want to tell him on the cruise, hey, I think I might be pregnant, but I had this suspicion and I couldn't shake it. And so I wanted to stop drinking for the rest of the cruise. There was only 2 days left. And so I ended up telling him that night, I was like, hey, look, this is what's going on. I have kind of a suspicion. I don't really know anything, but I just wanted to let you know because you're going to ask me why I'm not drinking anymore. So he was kind of shocked, but we were just like, we'll wait it out and see what happens when we get home. So when we got back from the cruise, so we left on Monday, December 4th, and we got back Saturday, December 9th. So when we got back, we drove back into town. We picked up our dogs from the boarding place. We came home, and immediately the first thing I did was pee on a stick, right? So I took the pregnancy test, and I think I took a regular one with the lines, and then I took yeah, I took a digital one too. Waited a couple minutes. We checked them out. There was no line on the regular one, and the digital one said no. And so I was like, okay. At this point, I think I was like 12 days late. I was like, this is so weird. And I was texting one of my friends, shout out Becca, and she has one sweet baby boy, and she is pregnant with baby boy number 2. And I was texting her about it, and I was like, yo, what the heck is going on? And she basically just told me, my tests were negative until they were positive. And so we went to the grocery store that night, and I got some more tests. We got home, and I was like, okay, I'm going to take another one in the morning. First morning pee, that's supposed to be like your most concentrated. That's when you are more likely to get a positive, whatever. That's just what I had heard at the time. So we waited, and we went to bed that night. We woke up Sunday morning, peed on a stick, went to brush my teeth, and I glanced down at the counter, and bam, there was a line. It was very faint, but it was a line. And so I took a digital again, and it said pregnant. And I started crying, like happy tears, because I was so excited. And I run out to Kevin, and I think the digital test was still developing at the time. So I run out and I show him the just like regular line test. And I said, is that a line? Because like I said, it was very, very faint. So I go, is that a line? And he stares at me. I love you, Kevin, I promise. He stares at me with like the most blank, oh, shiitake mushrooms look, and says, yup, that's a line. And so I'm crying, and he's just standing there. And to backtrack, to preface, he was scared, which is totally valid. Obviously, I 100% believe in feeling your feelings. So him being scared bothered me in the moment, but then we talked about it later, and it was totally fine. But so he was scared, but then also he was super, super sick coming back from the cruise, and he likes to make the joke, he's going to love that I'm telling y'all about this. He likes to make the joke that we both tested positive that day because he tested positive for COVID after coming back from our honeymoon. Luckily, I never got it. But so anyways, we found out we were pregnant that morning on the 10th, and we wanted to go tell our families. So we drove around. All of our families live, within an hour from us. So we drove around to each house and, told our family, our parents and siblings pretty much. And they were all obviously super ecstatic. So that was super, super fun. So the next couple of days we started telling, our close friends, our close family members. We weren't posting on social media or telling everybody yet, but just telling, our village. And then about a week later, the following Saturday, I had gone to the bathroom just to pee. And when I wiped, I noticed the tiniest bit of blood. And so immediately I am thinking worst of the worst. Like, oh, I'm having a miscarriage. And at this point, most of you listening probably know this. So if you already know this, ignore. But when calculating how far along you are in the pregnancy, they base it off of the first date of your last cycle. So at that point, I would have been what we thought was 6 weeks. So I go to the bathroom, I wipe, I see the blood. I'm immediately crying. I run out to the living room, toilet paper in hand, and I show Kevin, and he was like, what do you want to do? And I said, I think we need to go to the hospital because, again, I've never been pregnant before. I don't know what the signs of a miscarriage are, but I think blood and pregnancy are probably not supposed to go together. So I panic. So he takes me to the emergency room. We get there. I'm in hysterics. I can't even talk to the guy. He's like trying to check me in and asking me how far along I am. And I'm just waving at Kevin, asking him to talk because I'm literally hyperventilating. We get back to a room. Long story short, it was an awful experience. The people there were awful. Then ultrasound tech came in. She wouldn't let me look at the screen at all. She kicked Kevin out of the room, which I regret not advocating more for myself on that. I wish I would have been like, yeah, no, he's not leaving the room. But yeah, she kicked my husband out of the room. She wouldn't let me see at the screen. When she left, the doctor came in. He was horrible. I would like to sue him. But he came in and basically said that my urine sample tested positive. So that means at least it's showing that I was pregnant at some point. And they couldn't see anything on the ultrasound. So either I had already miscarried, or I was earlier than I thought I was. Because if I was earlier than 6 weeks, then they probably wouldn't see anything on the miscarriage, on the ultrasound. So they took a blood test to test my beta HCG levels. And he said, this was on a Saturday. He said, Monday morning, I would call your doctor and follow up with them to get another beta HCG test done so that you can see if your levels are rising or falling. And so I'm like, okay, I guess that's what I'm going to do. Then he proceeds to tell me that this makes me so mad. There's some people that just should not work in healthcare. He looked me dead in my face, giggled, not giggled, but he chuckled and basically word for word said, I mean, it's a 50-50 coin flip whether or not you had a miscarriage. And I've never been so stunned in my life to hear something come out of a medical professional's mouth. So we leave with no answers. We go home. I'm a mess. I can't stop crying. I don't know what's going on. Now I have to wait till Monday to get another blood test, which I won't get answers for, 24 hours. So I'm not going to know anything until Tuesday at the minimum. Later that night, the doctor from the emergency room calls me to let me know that they lost my blood. Yeah. So my blood was apparently nowhere to be found. It irritates me so much. At this point, we had Christmas with some family members the following day, and we had decided that we were going to tell them we were pregnant that day. So we went back and forth, do we still want to do that when we are in the middle of this unknown? And we decided we would go ahead and still do it. Again, regardless of what happens, we want our village to know so that they can be there to support us if something does happen. But also, I said this in the first episode, and I stand by this. Every baby deserves to be celebrated, whether they're here or not. If you decide that you don't want to tell people about it until you're out of the first trimester, or you don't want to post it on social media till you're out of the first trimester, total respect. There's nothing wrong with that. For me personally, I just felt like there is no safe zone. Anything can happen at any point, and I wanted to celebrate as long as we could. Obviously my goal was to be delivering our daughter in August, but God had other plans. So moving along, we proceeded to tell our family the next day. We didn't tell them about the emergency room or anything. We had told Kevin's parents, but not the rest of the family. But we, told them we were pregnant, and everybody was really excited. It was a lot of fun. So Monday morning, first thing, call the doctor, and I'm like, hey, this is what's going on. Need to get some beta HCG testing done. So I went in Monday for testing, got the results back Tuesday, and then went back, I think Wednesday. Yeah, I went back Wednesday, got more testing, and got those results Thursday. And I don't have the numbers on me, but they looked good. They were rising, they were doubling, they were doing what they needed to do, and there was no concern. So we moved right along. We continued, with Christmas plans. We told more of our family, all that good stuff. Got through the new year, and then we had our first OB appointment on January 2nd. So that was super exciting. My husband went with me. It was so cool. What an experience. I, again, never been pregnant before. Did not know that you could hear the heartbeat at the first appointment. And that's going to sound really dumb, probably. But, yeah, they were doing the ultrasound, and all of a sudden we heard the whooshing, and we both look at each other, and then I said out loud like a dummy, I go, "Oh my gosh, is that the heartbeat?" And the nurse in the room, she's like nodding her head, super giddy. She was so cute. So yeah, we heard the heartbeat. We saw the little, yolk sac and the fetal pole, and there wasn't much to see, but we saw her and we heard her heartbeat. And then we met with the doctor, and my doctor, chef's kiss. Love my doctor. She's amazing. If you know, you know. She told us everything looked good. Baby's heartbeat sounded good. At that point, we were estimating that I was about 8 weeks along based off of the first date of my last cycle. But she said that baby was only measuring about 6 weeks. So because I had just gotten off birth control, a few months prior to conceiving, I could have ovulated later or whatever. Like, it wasn't anything of concern. We heard her heartbeat. She was there. Everything was good. So, so at that point we were 6 weeks exactly. We scheduled our next appointment for the following month on February 2nd. Between January 2nd and February 2nd, we started telling more people. We did make a post on social media because we wanted to let people know we were really excited. And I did have some bleeding and spotting happening in that month between January and February, between the first and second appointment. And at one point I did message my doctor's office asking, hey, is this normal? And they basically said, if you are not bleeding to the point where you're filling up a pad in an hour, there's nothing to be concerned about. So I thought, okay, like, if they're not worried, I'm not worried. There was always still a little bit of worry in the back of my mind, but I still felt pregnant. I didn't really have a huge worry, if that makes sense. Then later in January, we decided that we wanted to do the sneak peek gender testing, which, by the way, so cool. Crazy concept. Like, so cool. You order the kit online. If you guys don't know about this, it's a kit that you order online, and they send the stuff to your house, and I don't even know how to describe it. It's like a little device that you stick to your arm, and then you press a button, and it basically punctures little holes in your skin and collects blood, and you send off the sample to Sneak Peek Genetic Testing, and they test for the gender early. And so we did that. So again, so cool, so worth the money. Loved it. We did that at the end of January, and we got the results the day before our second OB appointment. So on February 1st, we watched the video. They send you like a little email saying that your results are in, and it's a video, and it'll either say it's a girl or it's a boy. And so we watched the video, and it said it was a girl, and we were stoked. We wanted a girl so bad. So that was so exciting. And then, we started telling people that night. We had a small gender reveal planned for our like immediate family. We didn't really want to do anything big, so we didn't tell them. But we did tell like a few of our friends, and we took a video of ourselves opening the video and reacting to it. So we sent that to a couple of our friends and stuff. It was really cool. And so the next morning we go to the doctor's appointment, and I wasn't supposed to have an ultrasound at this appointment, but my doctor said that she could do a bedside ultrasound because at the last appointment, since I ended up being earlier than we thought I was, there wasn't much to see, and she just wanted to check on the heartbeat again and make sure everything was good. So when we get there, we go into the the exam room, and we're sitting there talking with the doctor, going over my blood work from the last appointment, and we're telling her about how we got the sneak peek gender results, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, that's so cool." And she's like, "Okay, let's do the ultrasound." So Kevin and I are super stoked. We're all giddy because we're excited to see like what we're going to be looking at, seeing our daughter. And To preface, that week before the appointment, this is going to sound so silly. I had been Googling, like, because at this point I was supposed to be 10 weeks. So I was Googling, what does a 10-week ultrasound look like? Because I wanted to know, like, what should we be expecting to see at the appointment? So I lay down and she starts doing I don't know what it's called, but like the belly ultrasound, the outside ultrasound. And she's moving and moving and moving. And then she's like, I'm not really getting much. Let me go ahead and do a transvaginal ultrasound. And immediately I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. I thought like at 10 weeks, shouldn't it be not a problem to like see the baby through the belly? I don't know. I was a little worried, but then I was like, girl, you have never been pregnant. You have never had an ultrasound. You're not the doctor. Like, just let her do her job. So she does the transvaginal ultrasound, and the part that was like a real slap in the face was I saw her, and Kevin says he saw it too. I saw her click a button, and I saw the part on the screen come up where the heartbeat was supposed to be. And then within like 2 seconds, I saw her turn it off. And when I saw her on the screen, when I saw her daughter Sage on the screen, I was like, oh, she looks really small compared to like what I saw on the Google. And then the heartbeat thing, and immediately Kevin says the same thing. Our hearts fell out of our butts. Like, we immediately knew what was happening. And so my doctor said, I'm trying to think of exactly how she worded it. She said, unfortunately, and it's, you know, of course, as soon as you hear unfortunately, it's like, oh, this is awful. So she says, unfortunately, there's no heartbeat, and she's only measuring about 8 weeks. So she was measuring 2 weeks behind, and there was no heartbeat. So at that point, I had been diagnosed with what is called a missed miscarriage. And again, for those of you who do not know, missed miscarriage just means that something happened and the baby stopped growing, the heart stopped beating, but your body hasn't recognized and it thinks that you're still pregnant. So the miscarriage hasn't physically started. Your body isn't showing signs that something is wrong. And because I kept thinking that in my head afterwards, it was something I was like, how could I not know? You know, I'd beat myself up about it. I'm like, how could I not know that she was already gone? Like, for almost 2.5 weeks, I had no idea. But it was nothing that I did. It was nothing that anybody could have changed. It was just what happened, you know? So of course, as soon as she told us that, I go into hysterics. I'm bawling my eyes out, hyperventilating. Kevin's crying. My poor sweet doctor is just sitting there looking so genuinely sad. And I remember her asking, are you a hugger? And I couldn't respond because I was literally hyperventilating. And I remember Kevin saying, yeah, she's a hugger. And if you know me, you know, I am very much a hugger. So she immediately hugs me and I hug her back, and it was just a mess. And so she tries to start explaining my options to me. And she gave me 3 options. She said, you know, 1, let the body process it naturally. Your body will eventually recognize that the life is no longer viable and that it needs to expel it. Or there's a medication that I can't think of the word right now, but there is a medication that you can take. It's just a pill. I don't know if it's one pill or a series of pills, but it's a medication that you take that would basically open the cervix and cause you to have contractions to make the miscarriage physically happen sooner. Or number 3 was to have a DNC. And in that moment, I couldn't make a decision. I couldn't process what just happened. And my doctor immediately recognized that. And she was like, hey, look, you have a little bit of time. Let's schedule an appointment for next week. Go home, grieve with your husband, grieve with your family. Let's talk next week and we'll go over the options and we'll go from there. So we leave the doctor's office. We call our parents. We let them know what's going on. We come home. And we spend hours crying, really. That was like all we did that day. My mother-in-law, my bestie mother-in-law, came over to visit us, and she cried with us, and it was just a lot of emotions. But later that evening, the realist side of my brain kicked in and said, okay, what's next? What do we do now? So Kevin and I sat down and had a conversation, and I was like, look, I don't think I can mentally go through physically having the miscarriage. I think I would rather have the DNC, make sure that everything is taken care of properly, because sometimes when women have when women have miscarriages naturally, sometimes they pass everything and it's not a problem at all, and that's great. Other times, they don't pass all of the tissue correctly, and it can either lead to septic shock, it can lead to sepsis because of infection for tissue that's not supposed to be there, or that tissue can actually kind of leach onto the uterus and cause infertility issues later on because it can cause scarring on the uterus. So at that point, I was like, I think I just want to go ahead and book the DNC, schedule it, power through, and we'll go from there. We'll figure it all out. And Kevin, of course, was 100% on board, supportive. He was like, whatever you want to do, I'm here for it. So we get through Friday night, we get through Saturday. Sunday, I started bleeding. And it wasn't a ton, but it was definitely more than just like the spotting that I had the previous month. So obviously doctor's office is closed on Sunday. So first thing Monday morning, I call the doctor's office and I'm like, hey, I need to go ahead and get this DNC scheduled. I know my body pretty well. I'm very in tune with my body. I take pride in that. And I'm fully aware that something is about to happen. So they were like, okay, doctor wants to schedule you for Thursday. And I said, no ma'am, no ham, no turkey. That is not going to work. I'm not going to make it until Thursday. You're going to have to push that up for me. I don't know how. Find a way, because Thursday is not going to work. So they call the hospital and they call me back and they're like, okay, we can get you in tomorrow at 12:30. And I said, okay, I hope I make it until then. And surely enough, if life doesn't kick you when you're down, I continued to bleed through Monday and then went to sleep knowing that the following day I was going to go in for surgery and I was going to wake up and I wasn't going to be pregnant anymore. And it was a really hard realization. It just sucks to know that even though her heart had stopped beating, she was still there with me physically. So to know that I would be waking up from surgery and my daughter would be no longer here was really, really hard. So I go to bed Monday night, and Tuesday morning I woke up at about 2 a.m. with some cramping. I was bleeding a little bit more and I was cramping. And I tried to go back to sleep, woke back up at like 4. I was starting to have contractions and more bleeding, and then fought myself trying to go back to sleep because I was in so much pain. Woke back up at 7, crying, waking Kevin up and telling him it's happening. Like, this is happening. I'm not going to make it till surgery. For anyone who has not been through this, there is this really stupid thing that people like to compare miscarriages to a heavy period. I'm pretty sure that 100% of the women that I know that I've spoken to about their miscarriage and pregnancy loss experiences have disagreed with that. I labored from 2 a.m. to 9 a.m. until I physically gave birth to my daughter at home in our bathroom. I was in excruciating pain. I was super, super pale. I was like, my blood sugar was dropping because I hadn't eaten since 9 p.m. the night before because I was supposed to be going in for surgery, right? So I couldn't eat or drink anything. I was throwing up from the pain. I was flipping around in a hot bathtub trying to alleviate something, but nothing was helping. So I finally passed her, and it felt like, in that moment, it felt like an instant relief. Like, oh my gosh, I'm not in pain anymore. I'm not suffering. The worst is over. You know, it's going to be okay. And then about 10 minutes later, the contractions came back. And again, blood warning, skip forward if you don't want to hear this. I couldn't stop bleeding, like, to the point where Kevin was shaking. He was so scared because I was laughing. You have to tell me, like, there's got to have been a time where you were super, super nervous and you were kind of scared, so you just laughed because you didn't know what to do. That's where I was at, because I have never seen this much blood coming out of my body before. And so I was laughing, saying, I don't know what's happening to me. And Kevin is wide-eyed, staring at me, shaking. And he's like, we need to get you to the hospital. Like, he was very concerned that I was going to hemorrhage. And so I thought about whether or not I was going to say this, but I'm going to say it because there is no shame on this podcast. I put on my diaper and we went to the hospital. So we went to the hospital like 2 hours early. I think we got there around 10. And we went to check in for pre-op. And every time I was having these contractions, I couldn't sit still. Like, I had to get up and move around. And so I was like pacing the pre-op waiting room. And finally, one of the pre-op nurses comes out and she's like, hey, we can't do anything for you in pre-op before we actually take you back to pre-op. If you want, you can walk over to the ER, which was like the next building. It's not like it was far. She was like, you can walk over to the ER, get checked in there, and have them, administer you some pain meds or something, see if there's something they can do for you before the surgery. And so at that point, I didn't care. I was like, whatever, I need something. So we walked over to the ER. I'm pacing the ER lobby, and they finally call me back. And then they put me in a room, and they gave me morphine, which helped for like 10 minutes. Literally, again, I kept telling Kevin afterwards, I think they just gave me like a whisper, a little essence of morphine, because it did help for a solid 10 minutes. I was like, oh my gosh, I can just lay in this bed and I'm fine. But then after that, they weren't as bad. I will say that they did tone down with the morphine, but I would have to like sit up in the bed and rock back and forth. And I have no concept of time after that. Like, I don't even know. I'm assuming sometime around 11:30 or 12. I don't know. Pre-op came to the ER and got me and took me over to pre-op. And then, all the anesthesiologists and the nurses, everybody came to do their spiel. And my doctor came and we signed paperwork. And they gave me medications to take and yada, yada, yada. So then I go back for surgery. Which at this point, I was giggling with the nurses. I was like, please, I'm so ready to go to sleep. I'm ready for this anesthesia nap. I need it. I'm exhausted physically, mentally. I want to sleep so bad. So I go to sleep, have the surgery, wake up, go home. I don't even really remember much of that afternoon. I remember like being wheeled to the car and Kevin driving me home, but I don't remember like getting home or what I did that afternoon. I probably just slept. I don't know. The next morning I woke up. I thought I was Billy Badass and went on a walk with my neighbor for 2 miles. And I was like, yeah, I'm great. I'm fine. Like, the surgery wasn't bad. I'm doing fine. Like, the worst part's over. It's going to be okay. God has a plan. You know, all the things. Just trying to, and I think that was like my form of denial, was denying that I had emotions and denying that I was sad and upset and scared and all of the things. I just kept going, it's okay. It's fine. Like, I'm going to be fine. It's sad, but I'm going to be okay. And so, like, we go on this walk and I'm like, yeah, I'm feeling great. Psych. Later that night, I started having a lot of pain in, like, my midsection, like my hips, my low back, my pelvic area. I think really it was just all the medications from the hospital were starting to wear off, and that 2-mile walk probably did me in. So, for the next few days, I just kind of chilled. I worked from home. I didn't do much. Was taking ibuprofen, every 6 hours or whatever it is. But the recovery wasn't too bad. I mean, I had like pretty bad back and pelvic and hip pain, but besides that, I mean, it wasn't excruciating. I bled for, I want to say like 3 or 4 days afterwards, just like spotting here and there. So the recovery process of it wasn't too bad. And then about a week later, I had a follow-up with my doctor, like a post-op appointment. So I went to see my doctor, and that was really emotional for me. I was fine the whole way driving there, but as soon as I pulled up to the building, I got really emotional in my car. I was sad to be at that doctor's office, but it wasn't for the reasons that I wanted it to be, right? So I had a little cry in my car, and then I went upstairs, and I see a waiting room full of super beautiful, glowing, lovely, pregnant mama-to-bees, or mamas-to-be, I'm not sure, with, their little ultrasound pictures laying out next to them, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. So I go check in at the desk, and I immediately go to the bathroom, cry it out, and then I hear my nurse call me back. So I run out of the bathroom, follow the nurse back, do all of that good stuff, and then I go into the room. I was okay, and then my doctor walked in, and then I start crying again. And the first thing I told her was, I'm so tired of crying. I'm so tired of crying. I mean, my eyes have never hurt so bad in my life. Oh my gosh, I had to buy eye drops, and my eyes were just burning for weeks. Weird. Just weird stuff. Anyways, basically my doctor said that, she has no concern at this time about our fertility. Since we weren't trying in the first place and we were able to get pregnant, her big thing was, you guys are able to get pregnant. That's huge. A lot of people have a hard time just conceiving in general. So a lot of times when people have a miscarriage on the first pregnancy, it's just kind of a weird one-off thing. They did run tests on the remaining tissue, even though I did pass Sage at home. They did testing on the remaining tissue. They said they didn't find anything wrong. It was just some sort of chromosomal abnormality. It's very common with miscarriages. Again, nothing that I did, nothing that anybody could have done to prevent it. It just was what it was. She had asked me at that point, if I needed therapy or help or anything. And I told her no. I said, I think I'm doing pretty good on my own. I'm praying a lot. I'm talking to God. I'm, crying when I need to cry. And I was still kind of in denial at that point. I was kind of just like, yeah, like it's hard and I'm sad, but I'm going to be okay. Like, I don't need therapy. I don't need any of that. I'm going to be okay. And she basically said, once I get my cycle back after the miscarriage, that we could start trying again. There was, again, nothing that was seriously wrong or anything. So she felt safe with us trying again after the first cycle. So that is where we are at. I did have my first cycle. I'm on cycle number 2. Unfortunately, we did not conceive during cycle number 1, which sucks, but you keep going. God is good. I firmly believe something that I've been repeating for months now is God is not done writing our stories, and he is not done until it's good. So I stand by that. So yeah, that is our whole story. I guess just a couple of things I want to add in the end here is I am so grateful that miscarriage wasn't really a thought in my mind while being pregnant, because I got to fully enjoy those 2 months of being pregnant to the fullest. There was no concern in my mind. There was no worry, which in the beginning felt painful to me. It was like, oh my gosh, how could I have been so stupid? Like, how could I have been so naive to not think that this could happen? But now, in a better headspace, I'm grateful that I was naive, because unfortunately, after experiencing pregnancy loss, your brain changes, and I will never enjoy another pregnancy 100%. I will never be worry-free. I will never not have anxiety towards it because of what we've been through. And that's unfortunate, and I'm going to, try my hardest, and I'm going to keep praying and surrendering and trusting. But the reality is my brain is now different after experiencing that. So I am grateful that I did get to enjoy that pregnancy with Sage to the fullest. There's so many things I could talk forever, but that'll be the end of this episode. We will talk more about the actual grieving process after that doctor's visit, and things that took place after that, next steps that we took, and more into where we're at now, as well as I really want to address what not to say to someone experiencing pregnancy loss, because personally, I've experienced a lot personally, I have experienced a lot of just crappy things that people say that they don't realize are crappy. And, the more people that I talk to, the more women that I talk to that have gone through pregnancy loss say the same thing. It's always the same lines. But again, we'll get more into that in episode 3. So definitely tune into that. We'll talk more about, mental health, postpartum depression, psychiatrists and therapy, and emotions, and all that kind of good stuff. So, like I said, that'll be it for this episode. Thank you guys so much from the bottom of my heart for all of your support and your love and your kindness that I received just off of my little 10-minute intro. You guys mean the world to me, and this has been really cool just to sit down and even just write outlines for the episodes. It's been so fun, and this has been something I've been thinking about doing for a little over a month now, but I am definitely not the influencer type. I don't know how to do this, so, I'm trying my best with what I've got, and I appreciate every single one of you and all of your support and love. You guys are amazing. But yeah, that's it. I will see you guys in episode 3. Love you bunches. See you soon.